Okay. Hi everyone. On behalf of Russ and I, we would like to welcome to you into our home and thank you for coming out. Grace to everyone. This will be our 23rd gathering.
Yeah.
And I would like to welcome to the newcomers, Dawn and Chase.
Yeah.
And welcome back, Michelle and Scott. This is a place where there is no judgment. We all want you to feel warm and welcome and share whatever's on your heart. We have Nathan who's going to lead us, and the message for tonight is a wise rebel. And we're going to start off with 5 minutes meditation.
Cool. Thank you, Nancy.
Wow. Thank you, Russ, for the meditation. Nancy, thank you for the grace. I receive it. I feel better already. I hope you do too. So nice to just get quiet. Why are we here tonight on a Tuesday night in LA at this beautiful penthouse? One simple reason. God the Father loves you so much that He promised through His Son Jesus Christ and the wonderful Holy Spirit that your burden would be removed, you would be lifted, you would be healed, and joy would return to your life. And that's what we're about. We all go through things. No matter what I'm speaking tonight, I've been through it. I have the same struggles you do. I'm a man just like you. Very similar. But tonight's going to be great because I'm going to get right into the message. Russ asked me to speak about King Solomon. Last night in his share, he talked about something he read in one of his books. What's the name of that book?
The Way of Solomon.
The Way of Solomon. Okay. So I said, okay, why not? Let's go to King Solomon. So let me give you a little background, and my message tonight is entitled, A Wise Rebel. Some of you are thinking, wow, how could a rebel be wise? Well, listen, God, the Father, we call Him the Father, He loves outcasts. He loves messed up, dangerous, rule-breaking people. That's who He goes after to preach His message. Billy has a chance. That's who He seeks after. That's who He wants on His teams. He wants rebels. He wants just crazy people. So if you fit that category, you're in line for God's kingdom and what He wants to do for you. He loves. He never went after the fancy politicians or the wealthy people or whoever in that society at that time was big in society. He never went after them. He went to the lawbreakers because Jesus Himself was a lawbreaker. I'm a lawbreaker. I hate knowing the rules because then I'm conscious of them and I get self-conscious. It's like when you go someplace and you've got food and then it says no food, and the next time you go there you're thinking, oh, I can't bring my food. I mean, it drives you nuts. You get self-conscious about what you can't do as opposed to just living in the freedom I'm eating in this place. So anyway, I'm a rule breaker like Solomon, and so was Jesus, by the way, which is interesting. But King Solomon, and he was king. I want to give you a little backstory on where he came from. King Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. He was deemed that, and also one of the most foolish. Wow. Back to rebels and foolish people who God seems to give all the wisdom to. Doesn't that make you feel good? So, King Solomon was the second son of King David. If everyone knows who King David is, I did a message called David and Goliath. But King David was the greatest king that ever lived. He's the king of all of Israel. And David was a little shepherd boy. In that time when David was alive, being a shepherd boy was the lowest of the low. He had the worst job you could possibly do. But the little boy, he was always seeking after God. He was also hearing the heart of God, and he was making songs to Him. He was praising God. And so he had this wonderful, intimate relationship with God with those stinky, filthy sheep. And he would go out in the shepherd fields and he would just feel the presence. And God even declared him to be young David, to be a man after God's own heart. David did so many things being a man after God's own heart. He killed Goliath, who was 10 feet taller than him, that no army could destroy. David had all these superpowers through his relationship with God. And David was anointed king out of 14 of his brothers. He was the one that was chosen to be the future king of Israel just as a little boy. So David's a very special guy, and that's Solomon's daddy. All right? Now, King David, when he became a successful king, he became very wealthy, and he could have anything he wanted, and he had all the power and all the glory that God had given him to run his kingdom, the kingdom of Israel. And as Kingdom got older in life, things started to happen with David. And the little boy that was deemed a man after God's own heart, he started to become what we like to call restless, maybe anxiety. He might have been bored out of his mind. We don't know exactly what he was, but he was one of those guys who just had it all. And he had this awesome relationship with God the Father, but he was completely at this point in his life where he was just stuck. And so he goes out on a roof, as a man thinketh, and he goes outside and he sits on the roof and he sees this hot-looking chick bathing nude, and like every guy, he just goes crazy, and there's Bathsheba. All right, now I'm getting somewhere with Bathsheba. Bathsheba is actually the mother of Solomon. Now, if you know the story of David, a man after God's own heart, he was caught in the most despicable crime ever recorded in the Scriptures that was done by a man of God. David himself, a man after God's own heart, he, in his restless mind, his mind that couldn't go to sleep, he asked a prayer, one of the most ridiculous prayers you could ever pray to God. I'm going to tell you what he said. He said, "Search me and try me, O God." See, you have to be real careful about the prayers you pray, because God will answer them. And he will search you and try you. And see, David was in this relationship with God where God would just make all these covenant promises. Make covenant with David, bless David, give David the kingdom of Israel. And then David came up with his, man stuff, and he's like, well, try me, God, search me. Look, I'm your favorite. Test me out. Be careful the prayers you pray. Do you know why? When David asked that question, search me and try me, O God, God put him in a pressure cooker situation and exposed what was hidden in his inner man. And if you want what's hidden in your inner man to be exposed, then ask God to search you and try you. He should have continued on his path of just asking God for mercy and love. He got self-introspective. So David sees Bathsheba, invites her over to the castle. She's like, all right, my husband's at war. She comes over, sleeps with the king. They have sex together. They lay in bed, as they call it. She goes back to her house. He starts getting curious. He says, I want to know who this woman's husband is, all right? Uriah was the husband, and he was an officer. And David met with Uriah and then sent Uriah off to war. And Uriah, he said to his servants, he said, make sure he's in the front line. Uriah was killed. And the king, a man after God's own heart, not only commits adultery, which was the law at that time, but then commits murder to save his own skin and his own reputation. And that is King Solomon's mother and father. You see, this man, King Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. I think one wife would be enough problems to solve. I'm sorry for you married, but he had 700 wives that he had to deal with and 300 concubines. I don't know how this man handled it. But I want you to hear this. As there's some parents in this room. As parents, parents I've dealt with, they've gotten angry with their kids about their kids' behavior and things like that. You are birthed from a source. So whatever your parent had in you and that they dealt with, they are birthing it into you. I know it's not fair, but it's all about seed planting. They birthed that into you. And whenever I see parents get angry at their kids, I say, listen, go and ask your kids for forgiveness. Don't you yell at them. If it's in you, it's in your kids. You gave it to them. And Solomon was born out of this hostile place of adultery and murder. Those were his parents. Lawbreakers. But they did it to hurt people and in the name of God. So you could see where this guy has a problem keeping a relationship. No wonder he needs 700 wives. Look what he came from. So Solomon still loved his father. And his name actually means peaceable. So even as a little baby, Solomon was loved by God because God called him peaceable. So now in the days of David, this takes place in 1 Kings, David drew near that he should die. So Solomon's father is about to die, King David. And he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself as a man, boy. And keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, his testimonies, and as it is written in the law of Moses, that you, Solomon my son, may prosper in all that you do, and wherever you turn, that the Lord may fulfill his word So David's on his deathbed. He's talking to his son. He's telling him what to do, giving instructions how to live to maintain his authority as king, okay? So he's giving him all these things, but he's saying you got to obey the law, you got to keep the commandment. And he said, the reason I want you to do this is because the Lord may fulfill his word, which he spoke concerning me, David, saying this. And this is what God said to David. This was God's promise to David. If your sons take heed to their way to walk before me in truth with all their heart, this is what Solomon has to do, guys. He has to live up to his end of the bargain. With all their soul, God said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. So he's basically promising all of David's seed to sit on the throne of Israel if his boys can live up to their end of the bargain. That's what we call a bilateral covenant. There's two people involved. One person has to keep their end of the deal for God to keep his. Keep that in mind. So Solomon becomes king, much to the dismay of his jealous older brother, who didn't become king because his older brother tried to go and earn the kingship or tried to go and fight for it, and it was already promised to David's offspring through Bathsheba. So this says Solomon asks for wisdom. So here he is, this young man becomes king. So he goes and he offers sacrifices, and the Lord God appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. Isn't it amazing that God and angels always speak to you when you're sleeping because you're not in your conscious mind? They have to shut off your conscious mind just to get your attention and speak a word into your life. Now, maybe it doesn't happen like that. Maybe you're a powerful dreamer and you do hear from God in dreams. He actually heard from God in a dream and saw God, so it was even more special. So the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said this to Solomon, and I love this. I wish God would say this to me all the time. This is what he said. Ask Solomon, he's telling Solomon, God speaking in his voice, ask for whatever you want me to give you. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. Yes, please. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. And see, we get so caught up, I hear this all the time. If it's God's will, it'll happen. If it's God's will. And listen, that's a wonderful principle to live by. But see, your will is involved. God respects you, and he's given you dominion so that you can ask for the things that you like and the things that you want. Now, maybe they don't match up with his will perfectly, but even Moses changed the mind of God. And so now he's giving Solomon an opportunity to be in relationship for him. And he says, ask me whatever you want. So remember, don't surrender your power. A lot of religion preaches that. Like, you're here, God's up here. Let him tell you what to do and be the dictator. No, he loves your desires and your wants. He wants you to ask him for what you want so that he can give it to you. But he's going to give it to you in the way that's going to be safe and healing for you and bring you the most prosperity. So God's will involved. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. Wow. Yes, God, thank you. Solomon then began to praise. We talk about how important praise is. Adam shared that. This is what he says to God. You have shown me great kindness to your service, my father David. Because my father was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart, you have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne to this very day. So he's basically saying, okay, David kept up his end of the bargain. You're making promises to me. They're coming true. Everything's good. Thank you, God. Now, Lord my God, this is Solomon speaking, you have made your servant king in a place of my father David, but I am only a child and do not know how to carry out my duties. I wish that in our adult life we could talk more like this to God and just try to humble ourselves. Not humble and like, oh, we're weak and weary, but just return to that place and say, hey, listen, I don't have all the answers, God. Look what Solomon said. I'm only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. I'm only a little kid living in LA. Help me out. Show me the way. Give me wisdom. But no, maybe not for you, but for me, I get prideful and like, oh, I've been through all this. I've done this before. I know what's going to happen next. I've got this all figured out. I'm going to take it into my own hands and control it. And here's Solomon, who just became king, and he just says, I'm only a little child. I don't know how to carry out my duties. You show me. So then he starts to say, your servant is here. He's talking about himself. Among the people you have chosen. Remember, they were a chosen people. Judy, a great people, too numerous to count or number. Wow, he's just been thrown into this mix of all these people that he has to rule and reign over. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? He's saying, I'm a kid. I can't do this by myself. Do any of you ever feel like you're in that situation sometimes? Hey, I'm just your son. I'm just your daughter. I can't do this by myself. Will you be in this situation for me? How's this going to happen? What's going to happen next? I don't know what to do. All right? The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. Ooh, God was pleased. So God said to him, since, this is God speaking, not Solomon. God says, since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, you weren't being selfish, nor have you asked for the death of your enemies, go and kill all my... I guess God gets a lot of requests for long life, wealth, and killing your enemies. But instead, you asked for discernment in administering justice. Solomon is just got anointed king. He has everything handed to him. And instead of asking for all these things for himself, he just wants to have discernment to rule over his people. He wants a wise heart. Wisdom is powerful when you ask for it, folks. So that there will never... So this is what God said to him. This is crazy. Good crazy. I will do what you have asked, God said. I will give you a wise, discerning heart so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. When you ask God for wisdom, He will make you stand out and be such a unique individual and a special person that you'll be unlike anybody else around you. You're going to stand out. Moreover, God said, He's not done. Moreover, God said, this is why I love God so much. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for. Both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. You will be the greatest king that ever lived. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and my commands, as your father David did, I will give you a long life. So there's only one stipulation. He's got to obey the rules to get the long life. But the wealth and honor and everything else in his lifetime, he's going to get. And I love that, we talk about our will involved with God's will and asking Him for her desires. And see, he already knew that Solomon as king needed the wealth and the honor. He needed all that stuff to govern and to be, people to look up to him. So God gave that to him anyway. I'm sure that was in the back of Solomon's mind, like, oh, I really need all this stuff, long life, wealth, honor. But see, God looks at the heart, so He's looking at Solomon like, hey, okay, buddy, you were so great to ask me for wisdom. I'm still going to give you everything. I was going to give it to you anyway, but I'm so grateful. And he's just, listening to the heart of Solomon and trying to get to know him as you would in a relationship. So, out of all this wisdom, Solomon gained this kind of thing where everybody was coming to Solomon. It says here that he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He was a top musician. He'd be working for Signature Tracks these days. He was banging out the beats. And 3,000 proverbs. Do you know the book of Proverbs was written by Solomon? How many of you have proverbs to live by, or like someone will tell you a proverb to live by? That's King Solomon. So he had all this wisdom. He asked for the perfect things. Him and God are in great relationship. Everything's going good. Woohoo! He's writing the songs. He's writing the proverbs. And so he starts praising again. What happens when God gives us things? We praise. So he says, Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below. You who keep your covenant. He's saying, God, you're a covenant-keeping God. You keep promises. Your covenant of love with your servants who continue wholeheartedly in your way. You have kept your promise to your servant David, my father. With your mouth you have promised him, and with your hand you have fulfilled it, as it is this day. And we're going to read the promise cards later. I'm telling you, the promises that we're speaking and that God has spoken into your life, it says He will fulfill them with His hands. So God's a guy of action. He's the Father. He's not just going to say something and let the words just float in the earth. The words have power because they come with an action of His hand. Keep that in mind as you believe the promises. Now the Lord God of Israel, keep your servant David, my father, the promises you made to him when you said you shall never fail to have a successor. Solomon wants to keep his lineage as king, to sit before me on the throne of Israel. If only your descendants are careful, and he's reminding God of what the promise between the two of them is. If only your servants are careful in all they do to walk before me faithfully as you have done. Okay, so we know what the promise on each side is. And now, God of Israel, let your word that you promised your servant David, my father, come true. Then he asks a question, but will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. Wow. He really is starting to know the power and the magnificence of God. How much less this temple I have built. Solomon also built a temple to God, which we won't go into. Yet, give attention to your servant's prayer and his plea for mercy. Hear me on this. His plea for mercy, Lord my God. Hear the cry and the prayer that your servant is praying in your presence this day. May your eyes be open toward this temple night and day. So what is he saying? He's saying earlier, hey, you promised me this. I'm going to fulfill my end of the bargain. Hey, Ed, you're going to do what you said. I'm going to do what I said. I'm going to walk in your commandments. I'm going to do everything right. Okay. They got a deal going on, God. You guys ever make a deal with God? Like, hey, yo, you give me this, I'll give you that. Give it back. Okay, cool. We're good. Don't break your deal. Okay. So that's where the king is in all this. And what does he still do? This is beautiful, guys. Listen to this. He says, yet, even with all the promises and all the conditions that I've set on this for me to keep my end of the bargain, yet I still want you to hear your servant's prayer, hear my plea for mercy, hear the cry and the prayer of your servant in your presence on every day. Man, it's so powerful to ask for mercy. You don't have to have the right words. We talked about early on King David, this powerful king, had everything he ever wanted, a man after God's own heart. And then he starts trying to figure out, hey, God, search me, try me, let me be God. And David's like, David fell. He committed adultery and then killed the woman's husband. Are you serious? You see the danger in not crying out for mercy? King Solomon had everything going for him, and he's still saying, hear my cry, hear my plea for mercy. I'm telling you, when you're alone and distraught and you don't have a promise in your head, a scripture, you're not around any spiritual people, just cry out for mercy. Humble yourself. He'll listen to you. He'll hear the plea of a king to a servant to anyone. He wants to listen to you. And then King Solomon goes on to say this. He says, hear the supplication of your servant and your people Israel. When they pray, that's his subjects Israel, when they pray towards this place, hear from heaven, your dwelling place. And when you hear, forgive. Whew. Pray for mercy and then wait for the forgiveness. It's coming. Here we go. When Solomon had finished, we're getting towards the end, building the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, and had achieved all that he desired to do, he did everything that was in his goal list for the day. The Lord appeared to him a second time in a dream. You making count of that? As he had appeared to him before, the Lord said to him this. I love God. He's always reminding that he heard your prayer, because don't you sometimes think your prayers haven't been heard? He's reminding Solomon. I have heard the prayer. This is God speaking. I've heard the prayer and the plea for mercy you have made before me. I have consecrated this temple, sealed it, it's done, which you have built by putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there, Solomon. And as for you, if you walk before me faithfully with integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father. Again, it's a bilateral promise. If he does all these things, the promise he made to David will come to him. Remember that. Please stay with that. I promised David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel, which David never did. Obviously, Solomon became king right after, when someone else could have been king. God kept his promise. But if you or your descendants, this is God giving a little warning, turn away from me and do not observe the commands and the decrees I have given you, and go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them, and I will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. Israel will then become a byword and an object of ridicule among the peoples. Woo! So the promise is strong, but the alternative is not. God's letting him know he means business, and that's how much he loves Solomon, because pay attention, God isn't trying to be angry with Solomon, be some vengeful God that you've been taught. God is warning Solomon because pay attention to what happens at the end of the story. If he didn't give him the warning, worse things would have happened. He's trying to protect. See, God's anger isn't out of, let me kill you. You did wrong. His anger is that he's jealous over you. He wants to protect you so bad. He's just getting upset because you're not receiving what he's giving you. And he just wants you all to himself. So he's like, I know how to take care of you. You ever meet somebody like that? I've dated girls like that. Hey, I know how to take care of you better than the jerky guy that just verbally abused you for 6 months. And they still run back to the jerky guy. Okay, I get a little angry. Really? You could have all that and you went to that? I'm just saying. Out of all this wisdom and all the promises that have been made, King Solomon, it says in 1 Kings chapter 10, was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. The whole world sought audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. Do you hear that, folks, ladies and gentlemen? They didn't come to get the riches and the wealth. They came to get the wisdom that God had put in his heart. Aren't you glad Solomon asked for wisdom before he asked for the riches and the honor? And notice that when he asked for the wisdom, the riches and the honor came anyway. Rethink what you're asking for. Ask for wisdom. The whole world sought audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. Year after year, everyone who came brought a gift, articles of silver and gold. He's getting gifts for his wisdom. Robes, weapons, and spices, horses, and mules. I'll take anything you got. Just kidding. But Solomon turns his heart from the Lord. King Solomon, 700 wives. Good luck. King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Can you believe that? Women of the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, all these tribes, from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel. Now, God warned about all these nations. He said, you shall not intermarry with them, Israel, nor they with you. Surely, I'm telling you, I'm your father, they will turn your hearts away and turn them after your gods, not me. Solomon clung still, romantic Solomon, hopeless romantic with all the wisdom. He's got 700 chicks from every different nation. He's good to go. He's the Hugh Hefner of the scriptures. He's got his robe on. And instead of listening to God, what does he do? Man, you women are powerful. He clung to these in love, what he thought was love. And it says again here, just so you don't think I was lying, and he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. He even had princesses for wives. His wives turned away his heart, and he was just gone from God. Have you ever had that with people in your life? I think that's a very relatable thing. I want to elaborate on that for a second. Have you ever had people in your life that turn you away from God, turn your heart away from God?
Yeah, for sure.
All the time. Yeah. Why is that? God is powerful to use, and I'm not, women, please hear me. There's a seduction involved. It's very enticing to turn away from God. Because things in the world offer you so much more on the outside with the surface of the pleasure that you're trying to have. And all God's saying is, I just want the pleasure to be with me, and through me you can still have the pleasure. So it's very seductive. So their hearts started to turn after God. Solomon is gone at this point, and his heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David, so he's disobeying his father. Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord and did not fully follow the Lord as did his father David. All right? So we know where Solomon's sitting right now. Things aren't looking good. So the Lord became angry and jealous with Solomon because his heart had turned from the Lord God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Man, if God goes out of his way to make himself known to you twice, and especially in a dream, please listen. Please. And had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods. But Solomon did not keep what the Lord had commanded. Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, because you have done this, and have not kept my covenant and my statutes. Remember the bilateral promise? He's got to keep his end for God to keep his end. And my statutes, which I have commanded you. I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. Ooh. Man, everything's about to be taken from underneath of him. Nevertheless, this is the heart of God. I will not do it in your days for the sake of your father David. Let me say that again. Nevertheless, I will not tear it down or do it in your days for the sake of your father David. Do you understand how powerful covenants are? See, the whole church system got messed up in an old covenant, new covenant system. To this day, you are affected by the laws of Moses because they're being preached more than Jesus Christ, when Jesus himself came to be the law so that he could kill the law, so that you could live in the law of liberty, which is to love one another. And yet people still preach the old covenant. It's old, it's obsolete, it's out of date, it's been surpassed by a new covenant. Now the reason I'm telling you this is because if God would have honored his promise to Solomon and taken everything away from him, as he promised, because it was a bilateral covenant, and Solomon didn't keep his end of the deal. If he would have done that, right, that right there was a covenant that was made between the two of them, but not his daddy. See, the original, the covenant that was with his daddy superseded this covenant. And because, let me just tell you what the promise, the covenant to David was. You want to hear this? David, his dad, was promised by God. This is God talking to David. When your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, means you're dead, I will set up your seed after you, that's King Solomon, who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom, which God did. He shall build a house for my name. Remember, Solomon built the temple, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. I will be his father, and he shall... But do you know you have that same promise from God through Jesus Christ? I will be your father, you'll be my daughter. I'll be your father, you'll be my son. That's all you got to do is just be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men. So he's basically saying, I'm going to discipline him if he's in iniquity, and I'm going to raise up adversaries against him, which God did. But he's going to be punished, but my mercy shall not depart from him, Solomon, as I took it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. See, the promise that and covenant that God made with King David superseded anything else. And that's the whole reason that God was able to have mercy on Solomon. He had complete mercy on him. He could have taken the kingdom away right then. He could have dissolved it all. But he chose to keep the original covenant with David and his promise with David. Now, what I want you to see is two things before I close. First, God's a covenant-keeping God. If you don't know what a covenant is, go and look it up. A covenant is invented chiefly for defense. Basically, if you were one tribe and you had another tribe and you had enemies, the two tribes would come together and making a covenant together by blood, and they say, hey, listen, if somebody comes after you, I'm going to come after them. You're protected. That's a covenant, okay? So the covenant with David was kept, and it was regardless of the actions that Solomon had taken. See, I want you to hear this. These people are screw-ups, guys. They're rebels. They can never get it right. They get all the wisdom and all the wealth, and then they go back to worshiping other gods, and then they kill a man, and they go to... I mean, oh my goodness. If you were looking on the outside and you're like trying to find God, you're like, I don't want God if that's how you act. Goodness. Murderer, adulterer, whatever you are. But see, it didn't matter Solomon's actions at the end, because even though God was angry at him because he was jealous over him and he didn't want him worshiping other gods, he still kept his covenant with his father David, and that was passed down to this generation. And we are part of a generational covenant, which means that the promises that God gave to Abraham are ours through Jesus Christ, because Jesus is a descendant of Abraham. So when you're asking for things, first, ask for wisdom and discernment. Don't be afraid to ask for that. Because remember, all the wealth and everything else came. All the honor, all the glory came because you first asked for wisdom. But then second, remind God, if you believed and you received, remind God who you are in covenant with. Him, through Jesus Christ. And that all the blessings, no matter how big a screw-up you are, they're yours. And get excited about the promises and the covenants with God. Listen, a lot of people don't like to read the scriptures. I like to go through and find out everything that's available to me through Christ. Okay, there's a covenant, there's a promise. Oop, that's mine, that's mine, that's mine. And then bring out a list when you pray. Hey, God, I know I'm not king of Israel, but you, through my descendant, Abraham, you promised through Christ that I would get all this stuff. So I'm just reminding you that it's mine. And wow, you'll stop all feeling guilt and shame in your life and feeling like you have to earn a blessing. And you'll just start to receive the blessing, just like God said to Solomon. I'll be your father, you'll be my son, you'll be my daughter. Childbirthing does two things, and I'm closing, Russ. Childbirthing does two things. You can plant in your children the healing you never got, or whatever it is, and you can give it to them, and they can deal with that their whole life. Or you can remind your kids, like God the Father does. Say, hey, you're in covenant. You've been bought with a price. You're in the promises. And don't get down on yourself when you think, wow, previously God gave me all this wisdom. He gave me all this deliverance. And now I'm just right back in that pit again. Because all you have to do is cry out for mercy. Receive the mercy. And know that through the wisdom and discernment, guys, discernment is better than wealth. Making decisions that help you and help others. I'm so thankful for the life of Solomon and that Russell turned me on to him, because I learned something so much. I learned that it doesn't matter all the power you've been given and all the wealth and all the glory. None of that matters. At the end of the day, it's about a relationship as a child to a father. And you just, like you would to your parents, have mercy on me, please. Help me out. I need you. I'm just a kid who's been thrown all this responsibility. I need you. And that's Solomon.
Dude, thank you so much. I'm Russell. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Russell. You're welcome. I hope I didn't.
No, like I honestly think I'm gonna get like obsessed with this guy.
I'm
and
obsessed
start,
with him already.
like
700 what?
Googling best books of Solomon, and like I have such an alcoholic mind, and when I was
You wrote 3
using the
books,
restroom, I was like, maybe I'll go on a trip and like archaeology, and I like pictured myself meeting. It's so crazy. I was like there meeting people in this elaborate library, you know, and I saw, come here, I got a secret book for you. I'm just going to the bathroom, you know what I mean? And that's the world I lived in my whole life. You know, I was remembering that, like as a kid, my dad would put on John Fogerty, and we would drive from Philly to Maryland, and he would put on Creedence and John Fogerty and the Allman Brothers. And I used to love, just like I would be in the back and I would close my eyes, and I didn't want to go to sleep, but I would close my eyes and I would just let the music, I would feel the music, and man, I would just daydream and live in those daydreams, like, and it was really the same things as now. It was like me as an 8-year-old, like showing up and being like the cool kid and getting the girl, like at 8, you know what I mean? And the music was my background music to my movie, but I didn't even know what was going on, you know. And that's the world, like I was always in a fantasy world, and it's crazy, man. It's so. Anyway, so this is there's so many things, but he says, passion for purpose. He goes, your passion for purpose traps you in the pursuit of permanence.
There you go.
Your hunger for meaning blinds you to the simple beauty of the turnings. There is no tranquility in the way to. Yet the way of is peace itself. Are you fucking kidding me? That's the opposite of America. Everything I've learned is that. You know what I mean? My passion for purpose traps me in the pursuit. What's your purpose? What do you love doing? What's your goal? What are you going to do for your life? Is she going to make you happy? He's saying that trap, that passion, that's the trap in it. And when I let go of all that crap, and I just live life itself as the way of life itself, then I can find the beauty in the small things, which is really all I wanted. For the first 10 years of my sobriety, I had two major fears. Fear of not getting what I thought I wanted and fear of losing what I thought I had. Then I got a lot of stuff, and you know what happened? Fear of not wanting what I have. You kidding? You want to talk about a little suffering? You want to talk about deep suffering or fear? Getting what you thought for 10 to 12 years was going to be your quote-unquote end zone, and then getting that end zone and going, now what? And then Solomon points out that it's not the things that I got, it's the whole thinking and being trapped by that pursuit, the constant pursuit of it. It's amazing. This guy's amazing. Like,
That's
to
it.
the different level of like, and I need to read this over and over. I need to see this. You know, this needs to be principles in my life today that I'm in, because I'm a wanter. I'm a constant wanter. I was talking to Billy, like, you know, like I had a little bit of a funky week. I'm allowed to have off weeks or whatever. And like in meditation, I just heard this loud voice. It was like, stop looking for the pleasure and the results. Just stop. Just do the next right indicated action. And then I heard, get up, shut up, show up. And I was like, there it is. That's it. Forget it. Forget everything else. I have to forget everything else. Because as Randy would say, it's all a story anyway, right? I get up and I'll picture, I think my day's going to be like this. And I'm back as the 8-year-old kid in the back of that car. Oh, I think it's going to be like this tonight. Oh, when we go out, it's going to... And I have full-blown images in my mind. And sometimes my mind, usually when I'm in a past week like I've been, it pours haterade on them. Everything sucks. Fuck that. You don't want to go, you know. Upon awakening, I just say no. Nope. I don't feel like doing anything. Nope. Why? What's the point? That's a dark place to be, man. That's my alcoholism. That's my alcoholism, man. And so the trap in it for me is that I'm actually in the pursuit of looking for something. You follow what I'm saying? That I'm looking for something instead of just being like, I wake up, it's none of my business what I think is going to happen throughout this day. It's none of my business. My feelings cannot be my higher power. I get up, I shut up, I show up. And then I show up to life. You know what I mean? I just show up to life, and then life I have to trust life. I have to trust life, that life will open up for me, you know, and that God will give me the results that He wants to give me, you know. Because when I'm in that fairy tale, when I'm in that 8-year-old kid, I'm really playing God. I don't know it, but I am. I'm playing fairy tale. I'm playing God. You know, I'm not accepting my life for what is. I refuse to accept life for what is. It's been this new level of sobriety for me, man. And I was vacuuming today, and I've been in my head, and it's okay. And I just had this thought that as I was vacuuming, I said, "What an amazing growing experience." As I'm like, this is fucking amazing. Like, this is amazing. You know, I'm having a growing experience. Another level of, I think, true surrender. Complete surrender of what is. And, you know, last but not least, really simple. There's this guy, a very, very famous actor. He goes to Bravo, this meeting that we go to, and he's got like 40 years, been sober half his life. I'm talking about Academy Award winner.
Wow.
And he speaks, and he was sharing, and he was just like, you know, I really practice acting as if, regardless of how I feel, I practice acting as if, and when I do that, I start to become as if, you know, I start to declare, you know, regardless of how I feel, it's, you know, you can say fake it till you make it or whatever. I just start to act as if, and then he was saying how his wife is always pulling him aside, like, easy does it, take a breath. Slow down, you know, be here, be in the moment. I don't know. It's simple things, but when he says it, he comes from such a place, you know, the amount of stuff he's accomplished too. For him to be saying this, you know what I mean? A guy, trust me, I'm not going to say his name, but a guy that has it all, everything, a Solomon, you know?
Wow.
And he's telling me that he's got to act as if, and it's just like, I got to hear that. I want to hear that, you know, I want to hear that. So I'm grateful today. Today is a wonderful life. Today's a beautiful day, regardless of what my disease tells me. And I'm happy to be here, man. I'm happy to be here, and thank you so much. And that opened up something. I'm really going to get into this guy.
Yeah, and just piggybacking about what you guys said, when he was asking for mercy after he had received wisdom, to me that shows that he got in his head about things. It doesn't matter how much wisdom you have, you still got to ask for mercy. And Russ, you said something great. By the way, Solomon mirrors your life even at youth. If you read in the scriptures about the age he was when he started daydreaming and all this kind of stuff, crazy. I'm gonna start calling you Solomon.
Oh man.
Please
don't. Dope name though. Name my son Solomon.
Nancy is still the top wife. So yeah, but back to what you said about just being in the journey and not living for a purpose. There's so much power in what he's saying because there's a book written. Did anybody read it? It was very helpful. It's called Purpose Driven Life by this guy Rick Warren. And it's a very listen. Rick Warren's an amazing teacher. It's a powerful book that's helped so many people. So I hope I don't want to shut it down and say it's a great book and it helps so many people. I'm glad it helped you. But for me, I had a problem with the title of that book because I feel like in my experience and what Solomon's teaching, what Russ was saying in that book, so many people get burnt out on purpose and destiny. It's like every day, oh, what's your purpose in life? What's your destiny? And then when you get to your destiny, you're so miserable because you're trying to still figure out your purpose. And it's just like insanity that people just live like, oh, what is your purpose? Why are you alive? And then you've got the father like telling you, hey, I'm just your son, enjoy life. I'm your daughter, you enjoy life. And we're still trying to figure out what our purpose is. What if the purpose is just to be a son and a daughter and enjoy life?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have to accomplish all these great things and be these amazing people? I have people my whole life, oh, you're going to be a preacher someday. You got to preach, you got to preach, you got to preach. I'm 33, I just started preaching. You know what I mean? But the preaching happened out of relationship. And I think if you can learn anything from Solomon, it's that if he would have kept pushing towards his destiny and his purpose, he missed the relationship. He fell out of the relationship. And when you're with God, I know I'm preaching again, when you're with God, the journey is the destination. Stop trying to find a purpose in a future life. Live with Him in the relationship, in the meditation, and then out of that, purpose will come, man. Your destiny will be like, boom, I think of Heath Ledger in that movie Batman where he's playing the villain. He's like, I just want to catch the thing, but I don't know what I do if I catch it. I don't know what I do with it, And so purpose-driven life. How about relationship-driven life? That's my sequel to that book. And just about me a little bit because I want to share. But my brothers Justin and CJ who are always here and help start this group. They're away filming a movie in Alabama with Nicolas Cage and Tom Sizemore. Justin's learning a lot. But they're having this great experience in their way, and it left me. I live with my brothers. It left me with like an empty house. And at first I was so excited last Tuesday. I'm like, yes, by myself. I get to have my thoughts, because we're in an apartment. It's not like this, it's a little smaller. And wow, I have so much depression when I leave groups like this or like I'm around, because I run a studio, the John Kirby Studio. I'm always around, Michelle knows, she knows what I do. I'm always around people, right, Michelle? Actors, needs, requests, people need me for things. You guys need a message, everybody needs something. When I'm home alone on a Sunday, it's miserable. I literally made a list out of people I had to call and text, and I'm trying to do everything for everybody else. I'm just trying to connect with people that I don't know how to be alone with God. Because unlike Solomon, I don't see God in my dreams. I don't see Him in the physical form. I just have to go off the Spirit and off faith, that He's hearing me. But it's a sad place. I understand now why Paul, the apostle, he would always talk about the thorn in his flesh and this amazing, dynamic guy who preached and saved so many people, but he was lonely. He couldn't. And so, anyway, it's just been teaching me a lot, and these messages and what I'm learning from all of you guys after I preach them is actually helping me. Somebody said some things over here. It's really, and Scotty, it's really getting me to. And Russ said something to me last week or 2 weeks ago at his birthday. He said, Nathan, you're not the message, you're the messenger. And that messed me up real bad because I realized that I was using the message as a shield for the pain that I was dealing with.
and the unforgiveness and the healing that I needed. And I've been fasting for 2 days, not for a spiritual thing, just to get rid of the toxins in my body. And it's amazing what is exposed in your inner man when you don't have food and sugar to sustain you. I mean, I'm just like,
You're on a high.
I'm like barren and like down to the down to the bone. And it's hard to be naked in front of people. You know what I mean? Like, I'm talking about like naked in, hey, I don't have all the answers. So, it comes to a pride thing for me because I can preach a message in front of 5,000 people. I can get up. You can come to me and just try to preach over you, Mandy. I'll tell you things. I'll give you the scripture. But when it comes to myself, I get prideful, like Solomon. Like, oh yeah, I know it all. I've got it all figured out. Nobody can tell me anything. And so this message really spoke to me because I feel like just ask for wisdom, Nathan. Just ask for discernment, and stop trying to be God. That's me. On to you.
Thank you.